Greetings once more. Thank you very much for this opportunity to meet with you again to discuss an issue that I believe is of very significant right. Greetings. Thank you very much for this opportunity once again to meet with you as we discuss a very important subject. We have been discussing about Agenda 2030, that's a ZANU-PF Agenda 2030, and as we have been doing so, in fact, different people in Zimbabwe are talking about this thing. But there's an issue that I felt I need to address, and an issue that I felt we need to address together. So the title of today's discussion is that Matabeleland is bigger than Sengezo Tshabangu. Now this is a response to people who have been talking, attributing everything done by Sengezo Tshabangu to all the people of Matabeleland. I felt that we need really to talk about this issue. So the title of the discussion is Matabeleland is bigger than Sengezo Tshabangu. So this is going to be a response to Hopwell as well as Advocate Ndlovu, Fulcrum. That's his nickname. Right, why have I decided that we should have a discussion of this kind? Recently, in fact about 3 days or so ago, on the 6th of November 2025, Mr. Ndlovu, who is the leader of Zulu, a pressure group, filed a case at the Constitutional Court in Harare to challenge the ZANU-PF resolution of Agenda 2030. Now, what has become more relevant or more important is an issue that really seems to be sidetracking everyone against from the focus of everything about Agenda 2030. When Mr. Fuzwayo, somebody who some people have said is of Ndebele extraction, I'm going to address that part. When he filed that case together with his organization, Zulu, instead of looking at it as maybe a Zimbabwean who has filed a legal challenge, whether there are any merits to that or not, it's an issue for another day. But I want us to just read a report from Nihanda Radio that came to my attention. It says, a prominent constitutional lawyer, Ndlovu, has expressed outrage over what he described as a particularly disturbing attempt to exploit ethnic sensitivities in a political scheme allegedly linked to the efforts to legitimize the extension of President Mnangagwa's term of office. Then he says, Ndlovu said the alleged recruitment of members of the Ndebele ethnic group to front a purported constitutional challenge aimed at discrediting opposition to the so-called Agenda 2030 amounted to a cruel and a divisive political tactic. And it says a particularly disturbing aspect of Fuzwayo and Zulu saga is the deliberate attempt to put an entire ethnic group in line of fire, Ndlovu said, fraudulently recruiting the Ndebeles who have real historical grievances with ED to front a false challenge to the 2030 agenda is a cruel scheme. Right. So the issue, as I have said, when Mr. Hopwell broke the news that Mr. Fuzwayo had filed or was in the process of filing this application, there was mention of his Ndebele-ness. And while talking about Fuzwayo Ndebelenes, he was also mentioned alongside with Sengezo Tshabangu. So that instead of talking about Sengezo Tshabangu as a Zimbabwean, or talking about Mr. Fuzwayo Mbuso as a Zimbabwean, there is this tendency that's been going on for a while, whereby they are mentioned not as Zimbabweans, but as people from Matabeleland, as if everything that they do is representative of the people of Matabeleland. Now, this is very, very disturbing for a number of reasons. So one question you might want to ask yourself is, at what point does one become a Zimbabwean? And what is the qualification? For instance, why is it that when somebody maybe from another region makes a political choice, he is labeled as a Zimbabwean? For instance, when a politician in Harare, I'll just name a few without prejudice against them. For instance, when Mr. Douglas Monzora leads a party, we are never told about his ethnicity. When Mr. Tsvangirai or Mr. Chamisa is leading a political party, their ethnic identities are never an issue. But whenever Mr. Sengezo Tshabangu does whatever he does, it is then taken to incorporate everybody from Matabeleland, so that the criticisms, justified or not justified, which are directed against Mr. Tshabangu, end up being directed against every Ndebele speaking person. Now, this is a practice that has been going on for quite a long time. Whenever there is mention of Justice Luke Malaba, his Ndebele-ness becomes an issue to be discussed. Instead of talking about him as a Chief Justice, for instance, we then go on to hear reference to his ethnicity. And one question that one might want to ask is Zimbabwe premised on such a tribal basis, tribal pedestal, that everything must be seen through the eyes of ethnicity? I want to challenge the journalists. I want to challenge legal practitioners. I want to challenge politicians. I want to challenge analysts to explain this matter clearly for us. Because if we go back, for instance, to the issue of Mr. Fuzwayo and the court challenge that he has filed, one would say the issue of Agenda 2030 is topical across Zimbabwe, the length and the breadth of Zimbabwe. So anybody in Zimbabwe could have taken up a challenge or could have acted in a certain way. As I said, let's not go to the merits of the choice. So at the moment, we'll devote some time to that. But the issue is, if it had been done by somebody from Harare or from Dare, will we be hearing about their ethnicity? That's the question. So, for Advocate Thabani to actually say something about, he says here, the recruitment of members of the Ndebele ethnic group. So in other words, somebody who works with Mr. Fuzwayo is working with the whole of Matabeleland region and every Ndebele speaking person. Or when Mr. Sengezo Tshabangu makes a political choice, makes political decisions, he is doing that on behalf of the people of Matabeleland. For instance, you will realize and admit, if you are being honest, that the moment Sengezo started his escapades and all those recalls of elected members of parliament and so on, exploiting some grievances within the CCC and exploiting whatever technical loopholes may have been there. There was a quick depiction of Sengezo, as a sellout, and he was then disparagingly compared to Inkosulo Bengula, who is said to have sold the country just for a few grains of sugar and so on, even though that is not historically correct. But we have people who take occasion to ridicule not only Mr. Sengezo Tshabangu in an individual capacity, but they address that to everybody in Matabeleland and accuse everybody in Matabeleland of taking part in that kind of a sellout position, if one would call it that. So it seems like vicariously, whatever one person from Matabeleland does, it is attributed to everybody in that Matabele or Ndebele speaking community. And that's a very dangerous assumption, because we already have a precedent. And that precedent follows right from 1980, 1981. You will remember that when there were some issues among the politicians, such Dr. Joshua Mkabugonkomo and the then Prime Minister, Mr. Robert Mugabe, whenever there were differences, whatever Mr. Nkomo was accused of, it was then portrayed, or rather it was projected to everybody in Matabeleland, and that was the genesis of Kukurahundi. Because Kukurahundi, if one looks at it, it emanated from a point where, because of those political differences between ZAPU and ZANU, the whole thing was then projected on everybody staying in Matabeleland, and every Ndebele speaking person became a victim of it. You may say that it is far-fetched, but look at it this way. Whenever one man calling himself Gaikusu or calling himself Ndlovu Kamla Mankomichi, whatever his name was, decided to rob a bus or rob a bank or whatever, instead of him being viewed as a robber, it was then broadened to imply that the Ndebele people were harboring dissidents. So instead of calling that criminal a criminal, an armed robber, he was then portrayed as a dissident, and everybody in Matabeleland had to answer for those kinds of things. So I know a lot of people find this dissident history and the background history very complex. We are not going to talk about it now, but the point I'm trying to drive home, in fact I'm driving it home, is that when a few people were perceived to be dissidents, instead of pursuing those people, everybody else in Matabeleland had to pay for it. That meant that a pregnant woman was assumed to be a dissident one way or the other. Even the fetus in utero, that fetus inside her uterus, was also perceived to be a dissident. As a result, you find that Kukurahundi went on to, kill a lot of people, more than 20,000 people in Matabeleland. Why? Because of this attribution that when one person in Matabeleland does something, the whole of Matabeleland have done it. So that same mindset that was applied by ZANU-PF and Robert Mugabe regarding Kukurahundi, together with all those that were assisting him, they unleashed Kukurahundi because of a few people that they had grievances with. A few of those who may have been armed in the community, it was taken that everybody in Matabeleland was harboring dissidents, so everybody had to smart for it. Now, fast forward to 2023, when Sengezo Tshabangu got involved in those controversial recalls of members of parliament, instead of addressing it as an issue of misconduct or whatever, criminality or constitutional subversion by one individual called Sengezo Tshabangu, it was then projected as a Matabeleland thing. As I have already said, he began to be, you know, some caricatures or cartoons began to appear of Sengezo image superimposed on the, what you call, that of Inkosi Lobengula. And then those narratives to say, well, he's a sellout just like the Ndebele King Lobengula was a sellout, and so on and so forth. So the whole Matabele nation then had to, you know, get itself, get all those negative things attributed to it. And just out of correction, as a point of correction, the King Lobengula, who is often being depicted outside Matabeleland as a sellout, is the one man who is on record to have fought very, very strong and fierce battles against the British. They have it on their records, they have it in their archives. The British have it, they are honest about it. And the last time, the last known record of Inkosi Lobengula alive was at the Battle of Pupu in Lupane, where the Ndebele army wiped out a total of 35 British contingent led by Alan Wilson. And immediately after that battle, which the Ndebele people won convincingly, Lobengula could not be traced and accounted for. Even today, everything that has been said about King Lobengula after that Battle of Pupu is speculative, because not much is known about him. But the point here is that this is a king who died fighting to defend the sovereignty of the land. But now he is often caricatured and presented in cartoons as a man who sold the country for grains. How could he sell the country and then die fighting for that country? I mean, that doesn't add up. But anyway, that's not what we are discussing today. The point we are discussing is that really some critical and deep questions must be answered. Why is there always an attribution in Harare, or let me say outside Matabeleland? Why is there always an attribution of the acts of one Ndebele speaking peasant on everybody else who speaks that language? Why is there such a generalization? Why is it that when Sengezo does whatever he does, the whole of Matabeleland has got to answer for it? And by the way, there are many linguistic groups in Matabeleland, but it is always Ndebele that is singled out. And then Mr. Fuzwayo makes a decision together with Ipeshulga Zulu, and they file a legal case which arguably has its own gray areas, if one would call that. But instead of addressing it rather as Mr. Fuzwayo's choice and decision, it then becomes a Ndebele problem. It's then everybody in Matabeleland, because now we get to hear of, you know, somebody says the easily bribed in the Ndebele, the easily bribed Ndebele people, malleable, open to manipulation, and so the Ndebele people are easily bribed. So when you say the Ndebele people are easily bribed, what exactly or who exactly does that refer to? Does it refer to every man and every woman, every child in Matabeleland and who is Ndebele speaking? Is that how Zimbabwe is supposed to be built into a strong nation, where such divisions are just thrown around carelessly? Such tribal remarks full of prejudice and stereotype are circulated among the most educated people. You expect an advocate to know better. You expect a journalist who is an international, who is a winner of international awards, to know better. You expect everybody to be very measured in their language, so that when they are talking about what Mr. Fuzwayo has done, they do not generalize and apply it to everybody in Matabeleland in a kind of a smear kind of campaign against everybody. So you see, there are prejudices that have been peddled for a long time, and this one on being easily bribed is one of them. Then there is this other one of saying the people from Matabeleland are not educated, the uneducated. I mean, you hear all these sentiments and remarks from time to time, and you then begin to wonder what the word education actually means. Because you can't really talk about a population of 5 to 7 to 10 million people in Matabeleland, whatever the population is, and say that they are uneducated. All of them, honestly. Is that an honest remark? So, as I have begun by saying, Matabeleland is bigger than Sengezo Tshabangu. When Mr. Sengezo Tshabangu makes a political choice, a political decision, takes a political step, he is taking it in an individual capacity. If and when Mr. Sengezo Tshabangu gets or receives a bribe from anybody, or gives a bribe to anybody, he is not doing it on behalf of the people of Matabeleland. He is doing it in a personal capacity. You see, we can't afford to run this kind of double standards, that when Tshabangu does something, he represents Matabeleland. Can we say the same about somebody in Harare, or somebody in Mutare, or somebody in Zimba? When that person does something, does he do it on behalf of all the people of Mashonaland? For instance, when Guguraundi was sent into Matabeleland, did it represent everybody in Mashonaland? Did everybody in Mashonaland send Guguraundi? Is everybody in Mashonaland accountable and responsible for the deaths, for the murders, for the rape, for every kind of cruelty that was perpetrated against the people of Matabeleland? Because we can't be, we can't apply double standards. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. If what Sengezo does is attributed to all the people of Matabeleland, fair and square, by the same token, what Robert Mugabe did, or what Parents did in Matabeleland, should be attributable to everybody in Mashonaland. And if it were to go in that manner, are these same people who are quick to ndebelize Tshabangu, ndebelize Fuzwayo, are they in a position to accept as you know, as their responsibility anything and everything that has been done by Shona people, Shona speaking people to Ndebele speaking peasants? That kind of a double standard cannot be tolerated. And if Zimbabwe is going to morph into a stable country where there is respect for everybody, surely this idea of attributing one man's wrongs to a whole nation should come to a stop. Otherwise, really we are not going forward. There is no going forward on this. As I said earlier, I asked the question and I ask it again. What does it take for somebody to be a Zimbabwean? Is Sengezo Tshabangu a Zimbabwean or he's a Ndebele? Is Mbuso Fuzwayo a Zimbabwean or he's a Ndebele? Now, why do I ask this question? If they are Zimbabweans, then their actions must be attributable to all Zimbabweans. But if you choose to see them through an ethnic lens, then you are implying in a way that being Ndebele is not sufficient to constitute one into being a Zimbabwean. So it would then create an impression that there are Zimbabweans on the one end and there are Ndebeles on the other end. And by that logic, if we were to follow that logic very closely, the question then would be, what is wrong technically with the ideas that are being propagated by those who are saying they want a separate state? Because you can't, and let's get right, let's be very honest about this thing, very candid about it without mincing our words and without fooling each other. You can't say we are one Zimbabwe. Everybody is Zimbabwean. But when people start acting at national level, because this court challenge by Mr. Fuzwayo and Ipeshugazu, it affects Zimbabwe's political, it is part of Zimbabwe's political debate, one would say. And whether there are merits or no merits on it, it is a Zimbabwean issue. It must be dealt with as a Zimbabwean issue. So how about saying Mr. Fuzwayo, a Zimbabwean, suspected to be working with Sengezo Tshabangu, another Zimbabwean, have filed a case which at face value is likely to sanitize this Agenda 2030 by way of creating a precedent which will rule in favor of the current agenda, so that in future anybody trying to to challenge the agenda would be deemed to be contradicting what the courts, the Supreme Court of the land, the Constitutional Court, has said. So in a way, if we are saying that it is being done by Ndebeles, then in a way we are inadvertently pushing them out of the Zimbabwean identity. We are excluding them. Those who are seeing Fuzwayo through the lens of being Ndebele, who are looking at Tshabangu through the lens of being Ndebele, they are in a way implying that being Ndebele is not a qualification to being a Zimbabwean. If you are Ndebele, you are exclusively Ndebele. So in other words, they are Ndebeles, then they are Zimbabweans. And I believe it is a kind of line of reasoning that nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to propagate and defend, because surely it is indefensible. If one is going to argue that Tshabangu is Ndebele, Fuzwayo is Ndebele, these are their actions or alleged actions, and it implies that the Ndebele are easily bribed, they are malleable, they are susceptible to manipulation, and so on and so forth. So that then, as I have said, would justify this other, view that there are two countries in one, that there are two nations in one. And I can say, and without mincing my words, I believe those people who have been stalking these tribal sentiments, these ethnic sentiments, and they are actually not prepared to come up front and admit that there is merit in what Mr. Mqondisi and the MRP might be saying. Because those are the people who have been saying it very loud, that they believe that there are two countries. And the moment we are going to have this kind of sentiment coming from the likes of Hopwell, coming from the likes of Advocate Ndlovu, then it becomes very problematic. As I read one of Hopwell's remarks where he was saying when Mzilikazi came in, he came in and introduced violence and blah, 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 blah. I think we don't want to go back there. Because when Mzilikazi was doing any of those things, none of you and me were there. We don't want to prove or disprove that he did all those things or didn't do those things. And if for any reason he may have done them, which thing I doubt though, I think we shouldn't dwell on this. Otherwise, you know, somebody says an eye for an eye makes the world blind. If we are going to be talking in the year 2025 about what Mzilikazi did when he entered this plateau in 1837, 1838, thereabout, surely that's almost 200 years. And we are dwelling on that, and we are still classifying each other in terms of whether one is Ndebele or one is Shona. And at the same time, we are trying to build one nation, one country. What direction can that country take? So this consciousness of Ndebeleness, of Shonaness, this consciousness of this othering that seems to be very prevalent, especially, let me say it very frankly, this othering seems to be coming from Haran. And it's been going on for a long time. It's either it stops, or if it continues, then it's divisive. It does not lead into a peaceful future. So this thing must be nipped in the bud. Those people who have actually been stoking tribal division and who have always been quick to attribute one man's mistake or one woman's mistake to the whole nation of Mutagazi, or Ndebele speaking people, they owe everyone an apology. I personally will not want to attribute the actions of one Shona speaking person to everybody who is in Mashonaland, because surely that can't be true. For your own information, I've got so many personal friends among Shona people, very close friends of mine, that I pick up a call anytime, I pick up a phone anytime and call them, and we have a long conversation and talk about life, enjoy life together. We even go for dinners together, whatever we are able to do, because we are human first and foremost. So this idea of always looking at people through the lens of tribalism and ethnicity, it is the very issue that led to Guguraundi. And it is regrettable that the very reason for Guguraundi still exists as a subterranean current, because it is a sentiment that is underlying. And as I said, when one person called Kwesela was suspected to be a dissident, instead of looking for him all over the country, wherever they thought they could find him, they then assumed everybody in Matabeleland was a dissident. And this sentiment has gone on for 45 years since independence. Whenever one person in Matabeleland does something, the whole of Matabeleland have done it. And it is spoken at government level, decisions at government level, because Guguraundi was a government decision. Even at individual level, even in the newsrooms, chambers, where advocates and justices meet. But of course, I don't want to say anything about a justice. I've not heard anything from a justice saying it. But when it comes from an advocate, surely it becomes a very, very serious thing. So, and you expect that as an officer of the court, and as a custodian of the law, somebody who has sworn to protect the Constitution of Zimbabwe, where we have a chapter 4 that talks about this Declaration of Rights. This advocate must know better that the issue of ethnic identity is not something that should be abused to make the whole Ndebele nation feel guilty for the actions of one man who has made his own choice. Do you honestly believe that when Mr. Fuzayo decided to file this case together with Ipe Shubikazu, he went around consulting everybody in Matabeleland, every Ndebele speaking person, so that they went on to endorse it? Is that honestly the right kind of way to look at it? So that would be very, very, very problematic. So because Mr. Ziyambi, the Minister of Justice, whatever, when he read that resolution of ZANU-PF in Mutare, did he represent all the people that speak the same language that he does? Because if we can say that whatever Mr. Fuzayo has done represents his own ethnic group, then what Ziyambi is doing or saying also represents his own ethnic group. So how do you select that when Ziyambi talks, he's not speaking on behalf of his ethnic group, but when Fuzayo does, or when Tshabangu does, he's speaking for the whole ethnic group? That kind of thinking really, it requires an answer, especially from those who have been at the forefront of tackling this notion that whenever the Ndebele speaking person does something, he does it on behalf of the Ndebele nation, the Ndebele people, if one would call it that, and all the people of Matabeleland. So just to round it up, I reiterate, Matabeleland is bigger than Sengezo Tshabangu. It has got far more people than Mr. Sengezo Tshabangu is able to represent. And for your own information, the people of Matabeleland are not amused. They are not all amused with what Mr. Sengezo is saying and doing. I know of many people in Matabeleland who are very disgusted with all those recalls, because they are a violation of the will of the people who had voted for those candidates, and they are a violation of the will of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which says that, you know, elections must be credible, free, fair. So for people to vote for a candidate and then to have that candidate recalled through a manipulative process of court and lawfare and so on, we are all aware of that, and we have not endorsed what Mr. Tshabangu did. It was in his own individual capacity, for his own ends and designs, and for all the members of the Citizens Coalition for Change, which some of us have never been part of. So to then attribute his actions to everybody in Matabeleland is callous, it's criminal, it's irresponsible, it's disdainful. It must be impugned by all standards, because attributing his actions to everybody is actually smearing everybody within that national group. And remember, nobody chose to be born Ndebele or to be born into any other ethnic group. So people cannot be held guilty for having been born to an ethnic group. And people cannot distance themselves from an ethnic group just because one or two among them has done one or two things that are wayward. Except for Innocent Kala, who once spoke that he wanted to go into a river and get baptized so that he would wash out being Ndebele. The rest of the people are not seeking for that river of baptism. So just as much as you were born into that ethnic group and you did not choose to be born in there, the same grace must be extended to Ndebele speaking people. They did not choose to be born to that ethnic group that they were born into. And even if one would argue that their great-grandforefathers, the likes of Mzilikazi, came from the KZN and so on, they are the ones who came, not the ones who were born there who are born in this country. So, if you could have a way of punishing Mzilikazi, go to his grave and punish him for him, come all the way. But honestly, you are not going to be holding anybody else at fault and imputing guilt upon people who did not come from anywhere but who were born inside the boundaries of this country. So we need to respect each other. If we are all Zimbabweans, then let's treat each other with respect. But if being Ndebele is not enough to make one a Zimbabwean, then the message must be spoken clearly so that a better solution can be worked out. Thank you very much for being part of today's discussion. I hope it has really pricked some thoughts here and there. I look forward to having more discussions of this nature. And if you have any remarks or comments to make, feel free to make them so that we can take the discussion further. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.